Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last session of Animal Adaptations. It's Shauna here, Manitoba Museum at Home. I am very excited, as usual, for today's session. Today's going to be migration, hibernation, and nocturnal behaviors. And so thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who have joined us for all 6 sessions, I don't know, if you're like me, we have learned so much from Corinne. It has been amazing. And you know, last week, Corinne talked to us about life cycles. And then she was telling us before about how animals eat. And you know, I got to thinking, that's a lot of energy that animals use. Like, do they ever sleep? Do they ever rest? I wonder if Corinne will tell us about that today. I'm very excited for today's session, and I think that we're going to learn a lot from that session as well. And I think Corinne will be joining us soon. Corinne, hi!
Hi, Shauna, how are you?
Very excited as usual. I was wondering about animals, like how do they rest? How do they sleep?
Well, you know, today we're going to be talking a little bit about exactly that. What do they do during winter, actually, to be exact? Because a lot of them will just disappear and sleep the long winters away.
Oh yes, winter. I definitely want to know how they survive our winter. Well, I am very excited. So I'm gonna jump out. Remember, kids, you can ask questions in the chat and take it away, Corinne.
Excellent. So we're going to begin over the last 5 weeks. We've been talking about animal adaptations. So animal adaptations are behaviors or traits that help improve an animal's chance of survival in their environment. So for the past few weeks, we've been exploring the lives of some of our Manitoba Museum friends, those animals that live there, and figure out why they look the way they do or behave the way they do. And so this week, we're going to be concentrating on what animals do to survive during our long, cold winters. So when the weather cools down and things start to get colder, it's very difficult for animals to find food because the ground starts to freeze, so herbivores have less plants to pick from. And also, if they were looking for bugs or things like that, those are gone. They're not able to dig in that frozen ground anymore. So some animals have adapted by either leaving our cold climates or sleeping the whole winter away. As Shauna was kind of wondering, do they ever sleep? And so we're going to look at that today. So the first thing we're going to look at is migration. Migration allows an animal to move to a different place during winter. So it allows these animals to find food and better living condition in warmer climates. So the first animal we're going to look at is Canadian geese. So Canadian geese migrate south from their northern summer habitat for several reasons. One, Canada geese need an open water. They have lots of land-based predators, and so they need to be able to escape those predators by going safely onto the water. If the water is frozen, they have no escape. That's one of the reasons they go. The other reason is their food is at the bottom of that lake. So they need to find waters, rivers, ponds further south where they're not quite frozen. So they tend to migrate near the end of September, October, even November, late November. And the reason they wait so long to migrate at that time is because those little ones that we saw last week in the video, they're just learning to fly. It takes them a long time to get their flying feathers, and so they need to wait until their young ones are ready to fly. The other reason is because the females are in their summer home, they also take the time to pluck their feathers that have been worn down or are very well loved and used. And so they will take those damaged feathers or worn feathers and pluck them. So they actually can't fly until around September and October. So when they're all ready to leave, they leave together as a group, forming that very wonderful V that we are seeing in the skies. They're all coming to Manitoba right now, so we're seeing them flying those V's. When they leave, they fly in those V's as well. And so they can fly over 2,000 kilometers in one day if the weather is good. This is also helping those little geese who have now grown to be very big sized geese. They're helping them figure out where they need to go. So they're getting some direction. And that's a good thing because geese always love to come back to where they were born, so they always come back to us in the spring. Now, another animal that migrates is the monarch butterfly. And so they will go all the way to Mexico, and it's a very long journey for them. Now, unfortunately, that monarch butterfly that starts its journey here from Manitoba won't see Mexico because it takes 4 or 5 generations of monarch butterflies to get there. That means it's not until their great-grandchildren, it's their great-grandchildren that will make it to Mexico. Now, when they're in Mexico, they will spend their winter under fir trees, under those canopies, and that will keep them protected from any extreme weather down there. And when they're ready, they will make the journey back. And again, it takes 4 to 5 generations because they have such a short lifespan. Now, the next animal we're going to talk about migration is a polar bear. Are you surprised by this? I know it's a pretty weird thing for me to say, but it's very true. Polar bears migrate. Now, before I confuse everyone today, they don't migrate south. They don't look for warmer weather. What they do is they move from the tundra onto the Hudson's Bay. And so the reason they migrate is because they're looking for food. And their food happens to be swimming under the Hudson's Bay, those ring seals. Now, before I move away from migrate, there's another animal that migrates in the north, the caribou. And so these guys will actually migrate through Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nunavut. They make one big giant circle, and it takes them a whole year. And the whole reason they're migrating is they're looking for their favorite snack, lichens. And so that is one of the reasons they keep moving and don't stay in one spot for too long. Now, we talked a little bit about migration and how animals move to make sure they always have food and they stay in warmer spaces if it gets too cold for some animals. But some animals will sleep the winter away. And so another example of an adaptation is hibernation. Animals will slow down their bodies and heartbeats so they can survive without eating or pooping or drinking any water for a whole winter. So we're going to take a look at some of those animals. So the first one I want to show you is our red garter snake, or red-sided garter snakes. And so this is really cool because they live in dens all together just north of Winnipeg in Narcisse. And it's actually one of the biggest concentrations in the world for snakes is here in Manitoba. And they will come and spend the winter together all nice and warm in those dens. Now, another animal that likes to hibernate, I'm sure you all knew this, is the bear. Unlike the polar bear who migrates from spot to spot looking for food, the black bear just says, there's no food around here. I'm just gonna go take a very long nap. And that's a really important thing because one of the biggest threats to black bears is starvation. And so they just spend all summer eating away and get really, really big and fat so that they can spend all winter sleeping. Now, while they're sleeping, when they go to sleep, they're going to go under a tree stump or a log and line that up with grass and twigs and leaves. So during that time, they don't eat or drink, urinate, or poop. They will slow down their heartbeat from 50 beats a minute to 10. So hibernating bears lose just about half of their body fat, but amazingly, they won't lose any of their muscle or lose any bone density from not eating during that time. The other really cool thing is that females will sometimes give birth in January, right in the middle of their hibernation. So that's when young ones are born. Now, bears aren't very heavy sleepers. They like to doze their winter away. But the next guy, I can't believe how much this guy sleeps. So the Richardson ground squirrel will be awake for about 100 days during the year. The other 250 days, he's sleeping. And so while we see them anytime between February and October playing around upground, it's usually the young ones that are playing around. These guys tend to go to sleep in July. It's not even winter yet, but they're already ready for sleep. I wonder why that is, but they sleep almost 2/3 of their life away. I think July is a really early to go outside. It's a little too early to go to sleep for me. Think of all those beach days that we could have. Well, the next one, this is going to be interesting. We're going to take a look at Manitoba amphibians. They are probably the coolest hibernators I've ever heard of. And in fact, these amphibians do 3 different things to sleep the winter away. So we're going to start off with frogs like, oh, actually, we're going to start off with the leopard frog. Talk about him. So certain frogs will actually find a pond and go all the way to the bottom and cover themselves up with mud. Now they do this because they can breathe in the oxygen through that water. Now, while they're sleeping under that mud and breathing very slowly, the pond is starting to freeze. Now, every winter, it's always a chance that that whole pond will freeze. And if that happens, that poor frog won't get any oxygen. So that's why they have to go fairly deep to make sure they still have a little bit of water so that they can breathe. But they will stay nice and warm under that mud as long as they have that oxygen to breathe. Now, toads and my friend the salamander here, they don't go in water. They'll actually dig in the ground and go about 1 meter down under the ground. And they will stay there. And the reason they go about 1 meter is because the ground freezes to about 1 meter when it gets cold outside. Even our ground freezes. So they try to go below what is called the frost line to stay nice and warm for the winter. And they'll sleep away there. And they'll be fine as long as it's not an extreme cold winter that gets cold, that freezes the ground below beyond that point. Now my last one, my favorite one, this guy right here, a tree frog. Him and some other frogs do probably the coolest thing I've ever heard. When winter comes and it starts to get cold, they just go hide under some matted grass or under some leaves or under a log, and they just stay there all winter long. And so when the snow comes and covers them, their whole body freezes and they become what I like to call a froxicle. And that's okay because they have this special sugar in their body that allows them to freeze completely. And when spring comes, their body will naturally thaw out and they'll be ready to hop around. So that's pretty cool. And actually, Shauna corrected me. It is actually a wood frog, this image. So now another group of animals that hibernate all winter long are bats. And so bats like to spend their winters underground in caves. They'll even go in mines to hibernate. They really like caves that have high humidity, lots of moisture in the air. The one thing that's important is that the cave needs to be a constant temperature. Unlike the bear who likes to doze, these bats need to stay asleep. So they are very much like the bear. They fatten themselves up for the winter and they're ready. They slow down their heartbeat, except they go from 200 beats a minute just down to 20. So that's a very, very slow heartbeat. But they need to be left alone because if we wake them up or if the temperature changes too much, they'll naturally wake up. And it takes them a lot of energy to fall back asleep. And they're not big like a bear. Bats are pretty tiny. So if they lose too much fat, they're actually not going to survive the winter. Now, bats do another interesting thing during summer. They like to sleep all day and party all night. Well, not party all night. That's when they get up and they live their lives. And so they go sleep, they will go hunting at night. And one of the things that they like to hunt, something else that stays up all night. And so being nocturnal is very important because there are less predators out and also it's cooler. So your body can actually keep all that moisture in your body so you won't sweat it out during the hot day. So we're going to take a look at some of the animals who are nocturnal, including the bat's favorite food, mosquitoes. Now, mosquitoes tend to hide for the hardest part of the day and they come out at dusk to feast on, well, us. So bats are really useful in hunting them and finding them and eating them and keeping them away from me. So they are both nocturnal animals, predator and prey. Another animal that likes to hunt at night is the owl. So owls have actually very good vision, so they're able to see at night, and they also have very good hearing. So they makes them very excellent hunters. They also like the darkness to hunt better. They're kind of ninja-like. And the best part of all is their feathers make no noise at all, or very little noise when they fly. So it makes them super cool hunters and able to pick up their prey without even knowing that they're there. And a lot of the things that owls eat like to stay up all night long. So for instance, mice and rats, they spend most of the night awake, so owls have lots to eat. So they have a really good selection of what they want for dinner. So that brings us to our conclusion of 5 weeks of learning. Those animals are pretty clever creatures. And have you noticed that we have just so much in common with them? We like to sleep, we eat food, we produce offspring, and that's pretty similar because we are part of that mammal family. So there's a reason why we are so similar to them. Now, I didn't see very many questions today. Did anybody have any questions? I think we're pretty clever. So I'm gonna move on to, you can still feel free to ask. I'm gonna move on to my challenge of the day, and that is to use your knowledge. So I want you, with your brothers or sisters or your parents or your friends, when it's safe to do so, to play animal charades. So this is one of my favorite games. You pretend that you're an animal and people have to guess what animal you are, but you can't use any sounds. So you just have to use actions. The other favorite game that I like to play is 21 questions. And now that you have all this knowledge on animals, you could actually play this game. So you can ask some pretty interesting questions like, is your animal a herbivore? And they have to get, or you have to get someone to guess what animal you're thinking of. Hey, Shauna, how are you?
I'm good, but I have a question.
Sure.
Can we play?
Which one?
The question one.
The question one, 21 questions? For sure. Do you want to think of an animal?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm thinking of one right now. I'm thinking of an animal in my head.
Okay. I'm going to start off with, is it a carnivore?
No.
Is it a herbivore?
Yes.
Okay. Animals that are herbivores. Is it a mammal?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, is it one of your favorite animals?
Yes.
Does it live in Florida?
No.
Does it live here in Manitoba?
Yes.
Does it like to climb trees?
Yes.
Does it have quills?
Yes.
Is it a porcupine?
Yes, you got it. Oh my goodness. So much fun, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Make sure you go and play these super fun games. And thank you very much for joining us throughout the whole session, for those of you who have joined us as well. It's our last session today in English, but in Friday you can catch this presentation en français. And thank you very much, everyone.